And just for a couple of quick clarification points, as I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to let you guys, since we don't have, you know, 100 people in the meeting, I think we'll just leave it open. If you guys want to ask a question, just use the at the bottom of your screen. I think Evan's going to highlight there's a reaction icon. If you just click on the thing to raise your hand to ask a question, that'll help us kind of keep it somewhat manageable and not sound like an episode of a political show with 5 different people talking at the same time. But again, please ask questions. Like I said, that's a good way for us to kind of learn more about this whole process that we're going to cover this evening. So, um, moving on to our presentation, I am Frankie Marsden, your swim league coordinator. My name, phone number, and email address are listed on this slide right here. Um, as I start every meeting out with, I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody. Any questions you have going into the season, during the season, after the season, anything that I can do to help you guys, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I work out of the house, so I answer that phone, pretty much when it rings, or answer emails when they come into me as soon as possible. So I'm around, very heavily, certainly at this time of year, moving all the way through to the end of June when we get wrapped up with our season. The only time you might have trouble catching me is maybe on a Friday afternoon after we get through the week. I might sneak out and play golf. But otherwise, I'm usually pretty good about answering the phone when it rings, returning emails quickly, and more importantly, I want to provide you guys with every last bit of help that I possibly can, whether it's answering questions about rules, processes, dealing with crazy parents, you name it. I want to be there to help you guys out because as coordinators, I know that you guys are not getting paid to do what you do, but you do a whole lot of very valuable and important work that helps make your swim teams and your swim meets operate well, operate efficiently, and most importantly, makes it a lot of fun and enjoyable for your kids. So again, please lean on me any way that you can as a resource to help you out any way that I can. Um, and again, the thing that just kills me is I hate seeing teams struggle, and inevitably sometimes the team will just they feel like I've got this, I can do this, I'll figure it out, and they kill themselves for hours on end trying to sort something out when a solution was a phone call away, and they struggle and they finally get to meet. Things may not go exactly as they hoped, and inevitably we end up on the phone, we're talking, and next thing we know, my question is, did you think about calling? And they're like, well, we didn't want to bother you. I'm like, you're not bothering me. It bothers me that you struggle. I mean, that's what I don't want to see. I want to help you out. So again, the only thing I can do is read minds. So quick reminder though, when you do email me, if you do, please let me know what team you're with. I'm pretty good with names and faces, but we've got, more than a handful of teams in the league, a lot of different coordinators, coaches, and so forth. So it helps me to move quickly to help you out and know which team you're with when you reach out to me. So if you email me, just let me know what team you're with. So moving into the meeting. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is specifically to talk about how you run a swim meet, all the jobs that are involved, all the different, personalities that go into those jobs, how they interact, how paperwork moves around the deck, and just a general timeline of events that goes on during the week of a meet. And we're going to cover both in-person and virtual meets. There's a good bit of overlap with a lot of this stuff, but every once in a while, they're obviously going to diverge. So we're going to try and highlight those where we can. And we've tried to spell that out as best we can in the league rule book and some of the resources we provided for you. Just a quick reminder on the Zoom meeting. Like I said, we will keep that chat forum open. So if you don't want to ask a question, but you do want to type something up, we have a moderator standing by. So like I said, you can bring that up if you like. But like I said, otherwise, use that hand raising function to pop up and we'll, unmute you and try and answer any questions that you have as we're going. At the end of the session, if you got a question that wasn't answered or, you get there and an hour later after the meeting and figure out, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask this, just call me or email me. I'll be happy to do whatever I need to do. Again, we will share this meeting via email. We'll send out the recap, a video of it and everything. So first and foremost, it's really important. We remind you every meeting, you need to update your team info if you have not done so already. That includes your coaches, your team reps, and your pool information. So please go to that link listed at atlantaswimming.com under swim leagues. Find your team. Look up all of the details on there. I mean, I've got pools that have, teams that have been in the league for years. And I looked the other day and a couple of them, their address to the pool's not even listed. So how is your official going to find out how to get to your pool? So that resource right there is crucial for us as a league to be able to communicate with each other. So that's the first and foremost thing you got to do before we do anything, is be able to communicate with each other. We can't do that if we don't know who the coordinators are, or if the coordinator that's listed is somebody that's moved out of town 5 years ago and probably doesn't want to get phone calls in Evanston, Illinois in the middle of the summer asking about an ASA swim meet against Brookwood Hills that week. The process for updating that's pretty simple. You just click on the link for your team. There's an edit function on there, and there's a username and password. If you don't know the username and password, email me. But the default for it is pretty much your team name with no spaces, and the default password for most of you guys is swim1234. So if that doesn't work, you can't log in. Like I said, email me. I'll get you the login credentials as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So just a quick recap on COVID protocols. They're pretty much what we had listed off last week. CDC is continuing to provide a little bit better guidance. And again, things continue to get relaxed. The big one was the state of Georgia this past week. The governor pretty much rolled back most of the restrictions that were in place. However, the two cornerstones of what they're still trying to do, and this is pretty much, stock and trade for every, health department, all the way from CDC down to your local municipalities, they're still encouraging trying to socially distance whenever possible. And they're still encouraging you to wear a mask if you're going to be getting close contact with people. So again, it's up to your club and your HOA as to how you want to proceed. But like I said, please keep apprised of what these developments are, so you guys keep yourselves educated. And in some cases, hopefully it'll open things up a little bit more, and maybe take some of those teams that we're doing virtual competition might have the option to move to in person a little bit later in the year. Next slide, please. So meets. First and foremost, communication is critical, and we will hammer this home with the coaches, especially in their meetings. But there are a lot of different levels where we have to work with each other in some way, shape, or form. And having an open line of communication is crucial in running a well-organized, well-coordinated swim meet. Swim meets in general, even the really good ones, are still pretty much organized chaos. But there are a lot of steps you can take as a group to make things work more effectively. And the cornerstone of all that is you need to start an open, clear dialogue with the other team. Coaches need to talk to each other. Coordinators need to talk to each other and work out all the details of your meets. Certainly days, if not weeks in advance of the meet. You guys have had your schedule for a couple of weeks now, so you should have already had at least some general contact with each club you're swimming to make sure you're all on the same page. Make sure if you expect it to be a virtual meet, that they expect it to be a virtual meet. Because we had one team that there was a little bit of a miscommunication, and they expect to be virtual in their contest. And even though the schedule was published saying if the meet's in blue that it's virtual, their teams weren't listed in blue, but they assumed it was still virtual. So make sure you're on the same page so there are no surprises in that process. And again, the other general stuff each week you need to work out amongst each other, simple things like lineup exchange, if it's an in-person meet, or the results exchange for a virtual meet, set that deadline for when you're going to swap results. If it's an in-person meet, things like parking, team arrival, warm-ups, team areas, where are you going to sit? When are you going to warm up? When are you going to get here? When you get here, hey, our neighborhood has these following requirements for COVID. Everybody has to wear a mask, or everybody has to, again, there are certain steps that are going to be different from pool to pool. So communicating that early and openly with each other manages things so much better. And your families that are coming, especially if it's an away meet, they have a much more smooth experience and hopefully a much more positive experience. And they don't feel like we got here and then they started, next thing we know, people are waving their arms and, hollering and everything else because we weren't wearing masks. We didn't know we had to do that. And again, it just becomes a very complicated situation that was avoidable with a conversation that could have been had a couple of days before the meet. Another biggie is, as we've seen the last couple of days, it can occasionally rain and storm in Atlanta, especially late in the afternoons. So go ahead and start talking, even though it may be a wonderful weather forecast for that week. Open up some ideas for makeup dates. If you want to try and get that meet in and complete everything and not have to finish up virtually or, have to take a weather tie, have the conversation early. with your coordinators, with your coaches, with your families. Hey, what are the dates that are going to work? Can we come back the very next day? Will the pool be available? So again, you can avoid a lot of frustration if you do hit bad weather in the middle of a meet by having this conversation up front. From there, it's incumbent upon each team to communicate with your families. So talk to them up front about, hey, we need X number of volunteers for the meets. The stock and trade answer I give every team, every coordinator, especially the new teams, is the one thing you need to communicate to your parents is just because they put their child on the swim team doesn't mean that's where things end. By entering their kid on the swim team, the parents entered themselves as well to help out in operating these meets. They require a good number of volunteers. So again, the parents are a crucial part of making that work effectively. So set out clear guidelines and expectations for them that, we expect you to volunteer for X number of meets. And if you don't, some teams fine parents, make them pay for it. And, they may spend the money and go out and pay kids from the neighborhood to serve as timers or runners, some other functions during the meet. Ideally, it'd be nice to have the parents do this. I think it's just part and parcel of all youth sports. The other big thing is communicate up front about arrival times. When does warm-up start? When can you get here? When can you not get here? Are there situations where you don't want the entire swim team there? And you want situations where, there's this limited window when people can show up and you want to get them in the building. Also, again, communicate up front about specific job descriptions. Not every parent has been to a swim meet before. Some of them have never even seen a stopwatch before. So again, make sure they understand what the jobs are. It could be something as simple as copy and paste stuff out of the ASA rulebook to say, here's what a timer does. Here's what a place judge does. But again, it helps them do their jobs more effectively and efficiently. Also, contingency plans for bad weather. So if you look at a weather forecast a couple of days out and you're going to, potentially have an interruption during a meet, communicate with your families well in advance of the meet. Say, guys, if we hit bad weather, here's what we're going to do. First and foremost, here's where we need to go to get to safety. Is it the clubhouse? Is it go to your car? Is it go home? Is it get in your car and drive to the Publix because the street leading to the pool's lined with big old trees that might blow over in a storm? Have that plan up front. Let them know what that expectation is going to be. So if we hit bad weather, you can move quickly with your emergency action plan in those situations. More importantly, let them know up front. So if you've had the conversation with the other team and said, okay, here's how long we're going to wait if we hit bad weather. It might be 30 minutes. It might be an hour. It might be, we'll wait till, late dark. Or it might be, hey, 20 minutes and it's over. But this will steer off the biggest problem teams have when you hit bad weather and the issues with rumors. Oh, I heard that the meet's going to be called in 5 minutes. And I heard, Glenn Burns lives in the neighborhood. And he said that it's, it's going to clear up in 5 minutes. Steer all that off. If you can say up front, hey guys, we had bad weather. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait this long. And at this point we can't restart, then we're going to reschedule for this date, or we'll call it, do whatever we're going to do. But it just avoids a mass exodus of a team when, again, it's an avoidable problem because the parents just don't know any better. And somebody just miracles something out of their brain and says, hey, this is what I heard we're going to do. And it was just completely fabricated. So if you communicate up front, you can avoid that problem. Communicate with your official prior to the meet. Each week, I will send out a schedule of officials several days in advance of the meet. First and foremost, you need to confirm with your official. So the home team's job, if you are the home team or you're having a virtual meet, you ask for an ASA ref, you'll get that schedule of who the official is with their email and phone number. Reach out to them a couple of days in advance if possible, but at least touch base with them in some way, shape, or form by 6 o'clock the night before the meet. If you're unable to get in contact with that official by that point, put me in the loop. It's not one of those emergency situations, but by 6 o'clock the night before, if you've been trying for a day to get in touch with this person and they just haven't gotten back to you, give me a heads up. I will at least try and reach out to that person personally. And if I fear that somebody's, might have missed the boat on the fact they were working that night, I'll arrange for a replacement. But what I can't do is have you call me up at 4 o'clock for a meet that starts at 5:30 and say, oh, by the way, we never heard from the referee and we hope they show up. Well, I hope they show up too, because there's not much I can do at that point, short of having a helicopter to fly somebody in because of Atlanta traffic. Coaches, when the referee gets to the pool, introduce yourselves. Let them know who the head coach is. Let them know, hey, here's what we want to do with the meet. here, if you're doing things a little bit, out of order or something like that, let them know, communicate up front. But more importantly, let the referee know if they have a disqualification, which coach do I tell? It might be the head coach, might be the assistant coach, maybe a parent that's volunteered that's keeping a clipboard and writing everything up. But the officials in general, in an effort to try and keep the meet moving quickly, they don't stop everything and go hunt down a swimmer. Those kids, even in social distancing with a less crowded deck, the kids just scatter to the wind as soon as their races are over, and it's hard to track them down sometimes to communicate with them if they were disqualified, why they were disqualified. However, it's very easy to tell a coach, then the coach can find the kid and correct what mistake was made. But that's a really important part of that. Also, with the first meet of the season and the fact that school's getting out late and everything else, the coaches have a little bit of leeway, and we'll cover this in the coaches meeting a little bit more, but they have a little bit of leeway to communicate with the ref. And if they're in agreement with the other team, maybe be a little bit more lenient for that meet. But the referee needs some guidance there and some common ground with agreement by both coaches to go, okay, hey, for the 10 unders, unless the kid swims freestyle in a breaststroke race and gets a huge advantage, maybe we let the small stuff go. Okay. But again, that's got to be communicated. It can't be one of those things where we just expected this to happen. It's got to be a conversation that's going to happen. Also critical, communicate with your HOA and your neighborhood board. They're becoming more and more aggressive about their treatment of swim teams, and they're kind of poking their nose into things that sometimes is not always very helpful. But part of the reason they're doing it in some cases is there's not a good line of communication between the HOA and the swim team. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, we got all these kids, we got all this money going on, and they just don't understand the scope and size of the swim program. More importantly, they may not understand how beneficial that program is to the neighborhood as a whole. But if you're just kind of ignoring each other and kind of keeping each other in the dark, that's really a bad way to keep things going. It's not going to end very well. So again, keep them in the loop. You've got a schedule now. Let them know what dates you're hosting meets so they can notify the neighborhood. They can put signage up, letting the patrons of that pool know that, hey, don't come here on Thursday this week. There's a swim meet going on. Pool's going to be closed. Because again, if that can be communicated early, the person that comes up to the pool and says, oh my gosh, I showed up and the pool's closed on Thursday, I can't believe it. Well, we sent out the schedule 2 months ago, and we sent out an email reminder the last 2 weeks. You don't have a lot of leg to stand on to complain about stuff because we communicated. So that's a big part of it. Next slide, please. So in regards to meets, we talked about this a little bit last week. Again, competition's a big part of the league experience. It's part of being on the swim team. But again, coming out of COVID with all the other hoops we got to jump through, it's not the end all be all of what we're doing here. Okay. We want these meets to still be fun. We want them to be enjoyable, but they're going to require a little bit more flexibility than what we're used to. So again, work cooperatively with one another. Communication is important, as I mentioned, and it'll make the meets run better. It'll make a good experience for these kids because they're looking for something good to happen in their lives. They've had so much stuff taken away from them over the last, year. So this is the golden opportunity for you guys to get these guys fully hooked and engaged and, get them involved in something really good and fun. So again, in general, the 2 tracks for meets are going to be traditional in-person meets. So most teams are trying to do that in some way, shape, or form. A lot of teams are looking at some sort of hybrid approach where they're either going to split the meet up into 2 sessions, maybe do the 10 and unders early, take a little 30-minute break, get that group out of there, get the next group in. That way they keep the number of people on the deck and around the pool to a minimum to stay within the good graces of what the HOA expects. Some of them are even splitting things up and saying, you know what, we're just going to do the 10 and unders this week in person, and we'll do the 11 and overs virtually, and then merge the rest of the results in the virtual format later in the week. Okay, but those are hybrids, but most teams are working towards full in-person when they can do it. Virtual dual meets, like I said, some teams just didn't have the opportunity based on their own restrictions and constraints in their neighborhoods, just couldn't make it work for in-person, so they'll do things virtually. That just means that you swim your events at your pool, they swim their events at their pool, and we merge the results electronically. It does provide a ton of flexibility for teams to do things in any way, shape, or form that they kind of want to do for that week. The only real constraint is just a deadline by a certain point in the week when teams have agreed to exchange results so they can finalize things, merge results, and get a final result to the league for result purposes. The other upside of virtual meets is fewer people on the deck. Staffing can actually be reduced a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the meeting. But again, ton of flexibility. So like I said, that's, teams we've set the schedule. So just again, stick to what you got. Next slide, please. So traditional and in-person meets. So again, for the in-person meets, remember the home team has the final say in what the COVID protocols are going to be for the meet. That involves mask wearing. That involves whether or not spectators can be on the deck. That involves how many people can be on the deck. That involves the format of the meet to some extent. So the meet has to be split into sessions to stay within their distancing requirements. Home team kind of has the final say on that. Again, communicate up front. Don't sit there and try and sort this out the night before the meet when you're going to be scrambling around. Meets are chaotic as things go. Communicate days, if not weeks in advance, to make sure you're all on the same page with this. If you're doing a hybrid meet, you got to split things up into separate sessions. Just keep in mind that meet's going to probably run later, so manage expectations. That also is going to probably require your referee sticking around longer, and that's going to probably require your referee making some overtime pay. We'll cover that in a few minutes later in the meeting. Like I said, meets may require limits on spectators, mask wearing, other measures that, again, your pool may not require, the other team may. But it's the home team kind of has the final say in that. Early communication between teams, like I said, it's just really important. You guys have got a schedule, sort those details out now. If for some reason you guys can't come to an agreement as to how an in-person meet is going to be conducted, the default plan is that meet will be conducted virtually. That's pretty much the end of the discussion at that point. I hope it doesn't get to that point for any teams, but every once in a while there may be a situation where it just can't be sorted out. There is a plan B, and that's what it is to pivot to a virtual meet. Again, work together cooperatively to make this thing work. We're out here for the kids. That's the most important focus in all this. Next slide, please. Virtual dual meets, just a quick reminder, those can be conducted at any time in any format that a team wants to do during the week. So that could be, we're going to carve out an hour in each day of practice and do competition, get times on the kids, and plug your results into high tech. At the end of the week, we'll exchange results with the other team. Okay. It could be, on Tuesday, we're going to get together like we would for a regular meet, just without another team here, and run the meet kind of like it normally would with the same people, do the themes, all the other fun stuff. That's another possibility. I think that's probably a little bit more attractive way to go. It maintains some of the familiarity of competition that teams are used to. And again, I think it's just a little bit more fun for the kids. If for some reason you're in a yards pool and the other team's in a metric pool, both teams are just going to email me their results, their high-tech result file. I'll merge the results for you and score the meet out. So you get a freebie on that one. You don't have to do it. Otherwise, if it's yards versus yards, you guys have got steps on how to do that. We'll cover in the high-tech training. Timers for a virtual meet, you can get away with one timer per lane if space constraints are an issue. If possible, though, try to have two, and we'll talk about that again a little bit later in the meeting. For virtual meets, you can self-officiate those. So your coaches could do it. You could have a parent that's got officiating experience. You could pretty much pick anybody you want as long as they've got some officiating experience. Don't just pick some person off the street to go, hey, take your mark, go. Doesn't work like that. You ought to have somebody with some experience and knowledge of swimming rules. Okay. More importantly, for virtual meets, if you want an ASA ref, you need to email me to request one. So if you know that you want ASA refs sent to you for your virtual meets, you need to email me now. Otherwise, we will assume you will self-officiate and will not send you an official. The cost for a referee for a virtual meet, even though it's one team, is still the same $90 it is for a regular in-person meet. So again, keep that in mind when you're choosing whether or not to do this, because that expense can add up for some teams. Most teams are going to probably go the self-officiating route. They did last year. We didn't have any issues with it, and it worked just fine. Just again, teams are on their honor to do the right things with this. But like I said, it's just common sense, and it's summer league. It's supposed to be fun. Next slide, please. Again, with a virtual dual meet, high-tech meet management, we'll cover it in great detail in the high-tech training, but in general, the way it's going to work is you're going to use all of your lanes. You're not just going to use the odd lanes because you're the away team, or you're not going to use the even lanes because you're the home team, use all 5, 6, 8, however many lanes that pool is, use them all. It'll let you get done a little bit quicker and obviously make things run a little bit smoother and help add more kids in the water to swim against each other. Swimmers from all heats are eligible to score. So it's not just heat 1 that can score, because we don't have place judges there. So we just open it up to every heat. Again, the way it's going to work is at the end of the week, you're going to create a file out of Meet Manager, because you'll input the times in a Meet Manager at your home portion of the meet, just like you would for anything else. But when you're done, you'll create an export file that you'll send to the other team. They'll create the same file. You guys can import those. It's about a 5 or 6 step process to create target events, to dump the events in, pull those results in. Then you just go event by event, almost like you would with a regular meet consolidation. Combine the 2 events into one. It scores the events. And when you get done combining the last event, you got a final score for the meet and you're all set. So coordinate with the other team. Again, the big thing here is set a target date, set a deadline for the week as to when you want to exchange stuff. That's the biggest part of the communication process. The other big thing you're going to have to work out is occasionally we have pools that have different depths at each end. So maybe a situation with one pool, the swimmers may be able to dive in it from both sides. And one pool, they might not be able to dive in from the other side. So for the relays, they may have to start in the water. So it's up to the teams to how they want to sort that out. The courteous thing to do is, even though your pool may be deep enough, is be on the same page with that. You may have to start in the water even though your water's deep enough to have kids dive in, okay? But again, work those details out with each other prior to the meet so you're not getting surprised by anything. Ribbons, you can do those. You don't have to merge the meet to do the ribbons. You can just do the ribbons day of just like you would. So again, the kids get those ribbons quicker. And frankly, it just means your kids are going to get, the kid that might have gotten a 4th place yellow ribbon that week might get a blue 1st place ribbon or a red 2nd place ribbon. Not a terrible thing to do. Again, in general, next slide, please. Be creative, have fun. This is all part of that process. So again, that's got to be a real important part of what you're doing with these meets. So again, keep the theme nights, keep the fun parts of the meets that you've done, even, when you had another team there, keep that up. Keep doing the good stuff for the community too. A lot of teams will do, clothing drive or, food drive to, help out during that week and try and raise money for a certain charity or do whatever. Keep that going. Okay. Just because it's a virtual meet doesn't mean you can't do that. And we'll try and share that information with the teams as we go through the season. But if you have something that you're doing that you're kind of proud of and you think other teams should maybe try and emulate, send us an email. Keep us in the loop about it. We do want to share that with teams. Next slide, please. So getting into the nuts and bolts of the meet procedure, all of this stuff is really kind of contained inside of the rule book. So the primary rules that are listed, or the primary pages that are listed right here, pages 6 through 8 of the rule book for regular in-person meets, and then pages 21 of 23 when it comes to the required stuff, people, and job descriptions. So I'm going to jump into the rule book real quick and kind of hit the highlights of that. If you jump to page 6 on your rule book, and I don't know if you can pull that up, Evan, but if you go to page 6, that lists off in particular mainly the stuff you need to run a meet. So the big thing there is it lists off the minimum equipment and supplies. So the stuff you need in general, obviously starting blocks if your pool's deep enough. Okay. Chairs behind the lanes. That's going to be maybe a hit or miss for some pools. Some pools are actually going to restrict the amount of deck furniture that can be around. So you may or may not have that at your disposal. So again, it's kind of up to y'all as to whether or not you can have it. But the deck furniture behind the blocks just helps kind of keep things staged. It keeps kids lined up, helps them get lined up before races. More importantly, it also lets you kind of literally physically socially distance kids based on the location of those items. So there it is. So lane ropes, lane markers, PA system. The big thing here is having at least one item that you can talk to people and let them know what's going on during the swim meet. So it could be something as simple as that start system, the electronic start system, that's got a PA feature to it. The catch with that is if you're using that for everything else, the starter's got to share that microphone with somebody else, which is not really an efficient or effective way to do stuff. So it helps to have a separate PA system where an announcer can talk to people, let them know what's going on in the meet, let them know what event they're on, occasionally announce the score, let them know that, hey, the pizza guy just showed up, the concession stand's open, all those good things. And more teams are playing some music at their meet. So having that available is a great thing to have. And also having the referee have their own start item helps as well. So if you don't have an electronic start system, you should get a bullhorn. So if you don't have a bullhorn, good place to get one, Amazon.com, just like everything else. If you literally put in there bullhorn, you'll find options for, about $25 to $30. They're inexpensive. The batteries almost cost more than the bullhorn does. But it's helpful to have that so the starter can be heard and understood. If you have an electronic start system like the Colorado start system, it works great. It helps have an electronic start, a beep, a strobe. It's real professional. It's not cheap. Those things usually cost about $800, but it's a great way to work things, and it gets kids on the same page. Stopwatches, same thing. Amazon.com is your best friend. You can find nice, inexpensive options. Make sure you have at least one stopwatch for every lane in your pool, plus maybe a couple of spares. Doesn't hurt. Okay. Technically, each team is supposed to bring their own watches to a meet. So if you're the away team, you're supposed to bring your own watches. So keep that in mind. But as the home team, having the extras there in case they forgot theirs, or there's, the person that was going to bring them had an emergency at the last minute, they couldn't bring them. Having those available helps the visiting team. Clipboards, same thing. Probably about a dozen of them is probably a good thing to have because each timer's going to need one. The place judges need them. Occasionally referee might want one. Just helps to have 10 to 12 clipboards available. Table for scoring, again, a location that's nice and central. If you have a computer table and you're not in a clubhouse, a tent to cover that computer is really crucial for a couple of reasons. Number one, the computer does not need to be in direct sunlight in the middle of June or July. It's just too hot. That computer's going to overheat. Number two, if it rains, you're going to be scrambling to pack that stuff up at the last minute. So make sure you've got the ability to get that stuff covered up. And again, it just kind of stages that area off cleanly so people know that that's kind of hey, we need to leave those folks alone. Computer equipment. So the home team provides the computer to operate the meet using Meet Manager or Meet Maestro and a printer for the meet to print things like heat sheets, last minute paperwork for the meet, most importantly, the ribbon labels. However, the home team, they provide that equipment. The visiting team ought to bring their computer and they ought to bring their printer. Here's why. Number one, it's a backup in case something gets broken, doesn't work, falls in the water, take your pick. Number two, sometimes the paperwork that's got to be printed before the meet takes a lot of time. And the visiting team may need a last minute heat sheet or a report that they're used to pulling up. If they've got their own equipment, they can go pull that stuff up and do what they need to do. And it's a lot easier to do it that way instead of having to go to the other team and go, oh, by the way, hey, can you print us 10 extra heat sheets? Don't be that person. If you've got your own computer, it just makes that stuff work so much easier. Minimum personnel, scroll down a little bit there, please. So in general, and we'll cover the personnel in just a second. This is just a good kind of condensed list of who's responsible for what. So for in-person competition, 2 deck managers, 1 from each team, an announcer, the home team provides that person, starter referee, the league provides that. I've already started to talk about those guys. So again, your starter referee, scheduled by the league, home team communicates with them in advance. They get paid $90 per meet, and that fee is split between the 2 teams. Okay. And again, specifics on the starter referee, I think are covered in page 4 about their pay and so forth and overtime pay. Just in general, the way the referee works, like I said, they show up, they're going to start the races, they're going to enforce the rules as they need to be enforced, disqualify kids that need to be disqualified, and they're going to keep the meet moving along quickly. Okay, so again, when that person gets there, make sure you introduce yourself as the head team rep, make sure they get in contact with your head coach. Ideally, if y'all can do that all together, it's not a nice way to get everybody on the same page, but sometimes it's a little bit chaotic before the meet. You may have to do that separately. The judge's recorder, that's the person that's responsible for literally just writing the order of finish on the paperwork that's used during the meet. And that's all they do. They don't decide who was in what place. They are there as a clerk, essentially. They're only there to write down the order finish on the piece of paper and hand it off to the next person to record the times. That's provided by the home team only. 2 master recorders, 1 from each team. The master recorder's job primarily is to take the piece of paper once the judge's order of finish has been recorded. They just go from lane to lane and write the times down from each lane. So the timers themselves, they'll have a clipboard where they can record their times when the race is over and then move on to the next race. But they'll have that time written down so the person that's writing down the times can communicate with the master recorder. Okay, our time for heat 1 was 17:62. Okay. 1 runner. That's an optional job and is provided by the home team. Okay. That person is only needed if your high-tech computer is located far away from the pool deck. So if you got to move paperwork around the deck a little bit farther, that person steps in and helps expedite getting that paperwork to the computer operator in a timely fashion. 2 computer operators, 1 from each team. Obviously, they can't sit at the computer at the same time, and we don't want them both entering times for each race. That's kind of silly. But what they can do is the person that is operating the computer, they can input the times, deal with any of the place adjustments and things like that, and do the other functional things during the meet. The person that's not sitting at the computer, they can sit there and help coordinate the paperwork as it comes in, because every race is going to have 1 sheet of paper, and that sheet of paper contains all of the places, all the times, any of the DQ information, all that stuff. They can help keep that coordinated, organized, stacked up, and make sure you don't get off track and accidentally enter a race in the wrong heat. More importantly, they can also look for situations where the timers don't agree with the place judges, because that occasionally happens. And for the most part, the way the league works, the place judges have the final say in who's first, second, and third, and so forth, and who scores points. Responsibilities of the host team. Scroll down a little bit, please. You provide all the ribbons for the Heat 1 events, all the non-exhibition events. So you get a stock supply of ribbons at the start of the year. So I'll calculate that for you. Teams will be able to pick those up next week at Marist on May 12th. Okay. When you get those ribbons, when I provide you a supply of ribbons, the home team gets all the ribbons to cover Heat 1 races. So when the ribbon workers are sitting there, when they're pulling from their supplies, there should be a common set of ribbons in the middle that covers Heat 1. And that's provided by the home team only. Okay. Any of the Heat 2 and beyond ribbons, those are provided by the separate teams. And the reason the way it's set up like that is, it's not always going to be balanced each week as to how many ribbons are going to be used. It's never going to be an even allocation. So based on that fact, again, it's all based on how many kids you've got on your team. It works much more efficiently to do it that way. So stick to that process. The home team provides all the computer equipment needed for running the meet, all the paperwork and everything else. They prep the pool, get everything set up, get the seating set up, stage the deck, the whole 9 yards. Again, in general, the home team will provide water for all the meet workers, not just their own people, but the referee, the visiting, timers, whatever meet workers they have on deck. Okay, make sure those people are taken care of. It's hot, it's humid. They probably would like a cool drink occasionally. At the end of the meet, the home team is responsible for calling in the score of the meet. Okay, they can either call it or email it. Please don't text. Okay, I have a much easier time keeping track of phone calls, voicemails, emails, texts get just shuffled around and lost. Okay, so again, please don't text the final score.
Go Sharks.
Yep. More importantly, when you communicate the score, don't tell me that the Sharks beat the Dolphins. I need to know that Martin's Landing beat Glastonbury. Okay. Again, there are tons of Sharks and Dolphins and Gators in this league. So the Sharks could beat the Sharks that week. So again, please, team, score, final outcome. Scroll over to page 7, please. So pages 7 and 8 provide a real specific description of the jobs that go on during a meet. I'm going to cover those in some pretty good detail here. Announcer, home team provides this person. Their primary job is let everybody know what's going on in a swim meet. Let us know what event we're on. Let us know what events need to go to the blocks. Let us know that the people behind the blocks need to clear out, keep that area not so congested. You're kind of the mouthpiece of the meet. But more importantly, you're also the face of your neighborhood. So that person needs to be somebody that is obviously somewhat outgoing, but not too outgoing. Also not somebody that's too, let's just say, too much of a homer. Every once in a while you get somebody that's so, over the top about cheering for their own team, and it just comes across as being a little bit, ungracious, unwelcoming, and things like that. Be supportive. Encourage people to cheer for the kids, but encourage them to cheer for all the kids. And if the meet's a blowout, don't announce the score every 30 seconds. Also, don't be the clown out there. We had a guy one year, years ago, that thought it'd be funny to announce the score incorrectly to a team that was just getting flat blown out. They were losing by 200 points, and the guy announced that team had won and then pulled a Wayne's World and said, not, which was just really bad. So he and I had a very, very, let's just say, lively conversation the next day after the swim meet, and they took his microphone away. Again, the person needs to be, judicious about what they're saying. Also, they need to make sure that they're not talking over the referee. Nothing drives a ref crazier than having an announcer sit there right after they've said, take your mark, and then hear, and nachos are now on sale at the concession stand. And 5 swimmers dive in because they're distracted. Okay. Next item is the deck manager. That's item 2. Scroll down a little bit, please. There's one of these people for each team. They're what I call the last line of defense. They're the last person to check the kids as they're kind of getting ready to get on the block. So maybe a heat or two in advance. They've got a heat sheet in hand with all the substitutions and changes in there. And they're going to make that check right before the kids get on the blocks to make sure the right kids are in the right lanes and the right heats. There's one person from each team. And the reason for that is you're not going to recognize the kids from the other team. They're not going to recognize your kids. The idea is to have somebody that's familiar with all the kids, what they look like, who they are, making sure that they know what they're doing. The personality type for this person should be somebody that's well organized, is somewhat authoritative, but not too over the top. Okay. Also somebody that's calm in a chaotic situation. Okay. Because there's a lot of people coming at them from all different directions as to, hey, what are we on? What are we doing? Where am I supposed to go? What heat am I in? They, again, need to be very calm about that, because you can get somebody that's a little bit too organized, too type A. And you can have a situation where, you get done with the meet and they're like, that was a pretty good deck manager. They did a great job. Nobody missed an event. Nobody was in the wrong lane, but 5 kids quit the swim team because they are terrified of that person because they run, such a tight ship. They got to, again, be approachable, but be organized and calm. Starter referee, like I said, person's provided by the league. Again, should get there about 30 minutes before the meet starts. It's all tied into traffic in this city. So again, you've got their contact info. They're instructed if they're running late to give you a heads up, but sometimes you can't hear your phone at the pool. You're doing 1,000 different things. You may not look down and realize the person texted you at 4:45 and said there's, a gridlock situation on the, on Jordan 400. So again, like I said, it's just one of those things. Communicate with that starter rep. Place judges, item 4. So this is one of those things where with the place judges, this is what we use to determine the order of finish in most meets unless you're using electronic timing. So the way that's going to work is each team provides one place judge. The home team provides one, the visiting team provides one. They sit next to each other, maybe socially distanced, with a heat sheet in their hands, and their job is to record the order of finish as they see it when the kids come in and touch the wall at the end of a race. They're going to just write it down on their heat sheet. When they're done, they'll then compare notes with each other. Okay. And if they agree, they'll communicate it to the person that's called the judge's recorder that I talked about just a few minutes ago. And the judge's recorder will lead that. They'll write down that order of finish in the correct column on that UK judge's placing sheet that they use to record the times and the places. Okay. It is an even system. 1 vote for each team. The judge's recorder that sits with them needs to stay quiet. They need to not try and, oh my gosh, oh, my kid, oh, are you sure about lane 4? They don't need to commentate on any of the decisions of these place judges. They need to sit there quietly and do their job. The place judges need to sit there quietly and do their job. They shouldn't be calling this stuff out verbally, and it shouldn't be a negotiation. It's pretty much, what did you see? Write it down. Once it's written down, compare notes. If you agree, great. If you disagree, then you can call over the starter referee and they can break the tie. They're the tiebreaker. You don't look at the times, you don't look at video, you don't look at anything else. The starter referee is the only person who can break that tie. Okay. The only situation where you're going to have a third place judge is if you have an 8-lane pool. It's just a lot of stuff to look at. So the idea is in an 8-lane pool, we'll have one home team, one visiting team, and a third person from the home team. But the way the jobs are going to work are the home team and visiting team place judge will cover first through fourth place. That's all the scoring places plus an overlap. The third place judge provided by the home team only will record just 5th through 8th place. That's their only job. So they don't get a vote in how the meet is decided. There's no decision in how that outcome of the meet is going to be done. It's still a fair system. Any questions on how that process or that job works? Cool. Let's scroll down to the next one. The timers. So the way timers work in an in-person meet, there should be 2 timers per lane. And here's how they work. They're both going to work. They're both going to be from the same team. So the home team will time their own lanes. The visiting team will time their own lanes. The home team's normally in the even lanes, visiting team's in the odd lanes. So the way they work is there's one person with a stopwatch, one person with a clipboard. There are not 2 stopwatches present. One stopwatch, one clipboard. The person with the stopwatch, their only job is when the race starts, start their stopwatch. When the race finishes, stop your stopwatch and tell your time that's on your stopwatch to the person with the clipboard. The person with the clipboard, their only job is write the time down in the appropriate place on the UK or on the timers, the timers form. And then as the master recorder comes by and record the times on the main score sheet, they'll communicate with that person so the person with the stopwatch is not distracted. If you use this system and use 2 people per lane, one with a stopwatch, one with a clipboard, the meet can run very quickly and you will get accurate times. Your odds go up exponentially. But if one person is trying to do that job where they're start the watch, stop the watch, write the time down on a clipboard, then the timer, the master recorder comes by and you're distracted while somebody's finishing a race and you're trying to tell them the time and oops, I missed the finish. That's not very efficient. It's not a very good result. Okay. So again, use 2 timers per lane. Yes, it requires extra bodies, but it works much more efficiently. Okay. Going back to the place judges, now I always try and provide a little bit of insight on the personality types that fit these jobs. A place judge should be somebody that's obviously seen swimming before. It needs to be somebody that has got good eyesight. It needs to be somebody that's also not going to sit there and negotiate over every last thing that they see. They need to essentially be somebody that's relatively confident in what they do, but not so confident that they want to share with everybody how confident they are about how good a job they're doing and try and influence the other person. Level-headed, calm, easygoing, good eyesight, good experience with swimming. Timers, again, probably helps to have somebody with a little bit of experience, but timers can pretty much learn that job pretty quickly. A real quick referral, I talked about stopwatches earlier. If all else fails and your stopwatches just go kaput in the middle of the meet, that iPhone's got a stopwatch function on it. You can use it. It's not ideal because it's got more distractions on it, but if all else fails, you got options there. Item 6, the judge's recorder. Talked about this person already a little bit. Their job, there's only one from the home team. They sit ideally behind the place judges. This reminds them that they're frankly not there to look at the order of finish. Their only job is to write down the order of finish on a form we call the UK judges placing form. Okay. And there are samples of these forms in the back of your rule book. And I'll refer to them a little bit later. I'll show you samples in just a few minutes. But that's their job. They're going to write down that order of finish in 2 places. There's a spot across the top that allows them to record the order of finish in the logical order that it gets recorded. So most people, when they write down an order of finish, it's going to be 4, 6, 3, 2. So lane 4 was first, lane 6 was second, lane 3 was third, lane 2 was fourth. And then they're going to transpose that into the actual lanes on that UK judges placing form. So when the computer operator's inputting it, it's easier for them to understand in a way that they're going to input it into the computer. Okay. really stress with this person, they need to keep their opinions to themselves. If I get a complaint about meat workers, it's usually about the judge's recorder sitting there trying to be the tiebreaker in the room, or just constantly, gasping, moaning, oh my gosh. Don't be that person. I joke the person that's ideally suited for this is a deaf mute, somebody that cannot speak or hear. But we don't always get that. So, like I said, get somebody that's, again, good handwriting is important. Okay, somebody that's calm, even-headed, just does their job. Master recorder. This person, if they want to get their steps in, this is the person you want. This person ought to be fairly physically fit and ready to walk around that pool deck and move around a whole lot, because essentially what's going to happen is once the judge's recorder's done, they're going to hand off that UK judge's placing form, that little score sheet, and that person's going to go from lane to lane, communicating with the person with the clipboard. Okay, what was the time for this lane for this race? So again, big part here is there's one from each team. Ideally, if you've got extra people that want to help out, this is a good place to put them, because this speeds up the process of paperwork getting into the computer person and prevents them from getting backed up or bogged down and having to wait for 30 minutes to announce a final score because all the paperwork stacked up out there on the deck. Runners, like I said, that's an optional job provided by the home team if it's needed. So if your computer operator's up a flight of steps in the clubhouse, far away from the deck, you may need somebody just to kind of, again, take paperwork quickly so the master recorders can go from lane to lane and keep doing their jobs effectively. Otherwise, if the computer operator is right there on the deck near where all the action's going on, the master recorder, that can kind of be in their loop. Computer operator, again, this person, one from each team. Like I said, the idea is they ought to trade off this job. It shouldn't be one person monopolizing the computer. But if they agree, hey, look, I don't mind sitting here plugging numbers in all night long, I'm okay with doing it. If you want to wander around a little bit during the meet, maybe watch your kid go swim, as long as you can help me out in keeping things coordinated, those are all negotiable items. Otherwise, like I said, I advise teams trade off, every event group. So one of you does the medley relays, one of you does the freestyle events, one of you does the backstroke events, one of you does the IMs. So again, it's not one person chained to the computer the entire time. That computer ought to be accessible to each team's computer operator, head team rep, and a head coach. And that doesn't mean they can just sit down anytime they want, start, typing away. But it does mean that they want to come up and go, hey, can you pull up the results for this particular event? That should be something that's reasonably accessible. Okay. Slide down a little bit more. So last but not least, ribbon writers. So that's a misnomer. They don't write anymore. They just pretty much peel the labels, stick them on the ribbons, and put them in the team box, bag, or organizer that teams are using. Pretty straightforward. That process, that's something that can be done a million different ways. Some teams love to do it just day of. It's a great way to kind of sit there, be close to the action, but not have too much responsibility. Sit there and socialize, hang out. And it helps if it's done the day of the meet that you can walk into practice the next morning and hand out ribbons. However, some teams, they don't mind printing out the labels, and they'll get them and they'll go home and, take a glass of wine, turn on the television, and peel and stick it home to their heart's content. Okay. That makes it a little bit more challenging to make sure that the home team provides the Heat 1 ribbons. So in those situations, we ask that if you're the visiting team, don't take a huge collection of ribbons, but maybe take, 50, 60, maybe, somewhere between 50 and 70 first, second place ribbons, and then probably another 50 ribbons of each place for, third, fourth, fifth, how many lanes that pool is. Okay. Any questions so far about the jobs? Okay. So I'm going to scroll all the way back in the rule book. Let's go to page number. I'll show you these sample forms in the back. Oh, come on. It is on page number. There we go. If you look at page 54, the big one there is the UK judges placing form.
I'm still going. Hold on.
I know. That's fine. We're getting there. We're scrolling. Getting close.
Please enjoy the music.
Yes, we're gonna play some music for everybody's entertainment purposes. Getting close. A little bit further than that. There we go. So there's the UK judges placing form. So this is the piece of paper that the judges recorder starts with. And if you notice, I've filled this out in my terrible handwriting. So across the top, first, second, third, fourth, that's the logical order that the kids finished in. So first place was lane 3, second place lane 4, third place lane 5, fourth place lane 6, and so on. The judge's recorder will then also transpose that into that vertical place column right next to where it says school, and they'll put it in logical order there. They've got time to do this because that's their only job, is to write this stuff down. When they're done, they'll then hand that form off to the master recorder, who will go from lane to lane and get the time, and they'll record it down to the hundredths, okay, in big, nice, legible writing. Scroll down a little bit further. I think I've got, yeah. So if we look on page 56, the lane timer sheet, keep going down a little bit. There we go. That's the sheet that the timers are going to have in their hands. So the event number is listed, what lane, what heat. There's a big spot for official time. And there are 4 slots. Teams are like, where do we write it down? You can write it anywhere. You can spread it out all the way across there. Okay. But that's that person with the clipboard in the lane. That's where they're going to go. That's where they're going to write that down. And then that's the time they're going to communicate with the master recorder, who will be going from lane to lane, getting those times. So those are the 2 primary forms we use to operate a meet. So we'll scroll all the way back up. And I want to jump to pages 21 and 23 of the rule book. And I'm going to cover most of the same material as pertains to virtual meets and kind of how those are going to operate. So in looking at virtual meets, most of the jobs and the stuff and the requirements are fairly similar. So if we look on page, scroll back up, Matt, one page. So if you look highlighted, I've highlighted the personnel. So here's where this thing got trimmed down with the yellow. All the stuff's pretty much the same. The big thing here is you only need one deck manager, and you almost don't need the deck manager. The coaches can help get the kids lined up, okay? One other thing I didn't really talk about in the regular meet description, notice there wasn't a thing there for bullpen. And the reason that's not in there is real simple. Every team's process for running a bullpen is drastically different. The league can't really put our arms around how teams organize their kids, how they get them to the blocks, how they get them there in a timely fashion, how they keep them there in an organized way. That's going to be different for every team, every pool, every parent. The general guidelines are most teams will have kind of what they call a den parent. And their job is they're in charge of one small age group, the 6 and under boys. And they usually put like some, big former football player in charge of 6 and under boys, which is always entertaining. But that's their job. And they get some specific paperwork, like an entry list. And we'll talk about that in the high-tech training a little bit more. But they'll get specific paperwork that lets them quickly identify what kids in what event, what heat, what lane. And it's their job to shuttle the kids back from their team area over to the blocks when they need to get there, and then get them back to the team area, keep them somewhat underfoot, under control, and make sure they get to the right place at the right time. Again, the deck manager, their job is they're going to take what the bullpen delivers to them and just double check it and make sure it's right and correct. Okay. Starter referee, we talked about that. That for a virtual meet can be somebody that the league didn't send. It can be something the team selects on their own. They can have the coaches do it, parents with officiating experience, whatever. Okay. It's not a requirement to have a league provided official for a virtual meet. You only need one place judge for a virtual meet. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes about why that's a little bit different, because the process is different for the meet. The timers, if space on the deck is a real constraint, you can get away with using one timer because the meet probably will not need to run at that normal fast pace that a regular meet's got to have, because you have two teams present and a lot more swimming going on. You won't, if with a virtual meet, you're not going to have the scores of exhibition heats you would have for a regular meet. So running at that really fast pace may not be a requirement, so you can get away with one person. If you can have two, I would still suggest having two. It just helps things move along a little quicker, a little bit more efficiently. You're also going to have what we call a head timer or a backup timer. And this person's job will be is, if a timer's watch doesn't start, the head timer, their primary job is when a race starts, they're going to start two stopwatches at that very same time. So somebody's watch failed to start, they can raise their hand. The head timer can go over, deliver one of the watches that they've started, and swap out the one that wasn't working, and that person can get the times. They're also, if they still have watches in their hand, they're going to stop their watches for the first and second place swimmer. So if for some reason somebody raised their hand and says, hey, I didn't get a finish time, they can go over, and if it was first or second place, they should have a time for that person, okay? If it's another place where they just didn't get it, then there are steps and processes for how to deal with that. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, okay? One computer operator, obviously from the home team, that job can be done pretty much at any time. You could actually wait until later in the day to input the times, the places, all the other stuff. But ideally, I'd do it the day of when the kids are swimming. It just ups the odds of you getting the accurate information into the computer and not missing anything like DQs where kids got in the wrong lanes or the wrong heats, things that get moved around. If that's not recorded correctly or accurately and notations aren't made of it, there's a chance the computer operator is going to miss some stuff, okay? One ribbon person, okay? Just from the home team. All these are going to be provided by the team that's hosting the meet. So we'll scroll down. The day of responsibilities for the host team, they're the same as a regular meet. You provide all the stuff, set the deck up. Okay, each team's going to communicate their scoring at the end of the week. You're not really going to have a home and away team for a virtual meet. The job descriptions for virtual meets. Announcer still, if you got one, still pretty much the same job. Okay. Skip down to starter referee. Like I said, for virtual meets, teams can self-officiate. The big thing here is all heats are in play. So all heats are subject to disqualification. For an in-person meet, we only disqualify kids in heat one, okay, because that's the scoring heat. For virtual competition, since all heats are in play, all heats need to be held to the same officiating standard. So just keep that in mind. If you're self-officiating, you need to unfortunately DQ the kid in heat three, because they didn't do the stroke effectively. Place judges, they take a more secondary position in these meets. So the big thing here is they're pretty much a backup to the timers. It works a little bit differently than it does for an in-person meet. So for virtual meets, you're going to have a place judge sit there and write down their order of finish. That info is not going to get recorded onto the UK judge's placing form. It's only going to come up if you have a situation where the regular lane timer and the head timer or backup timer don't get a time for a lane. At that point, the place judge will be consulted to try and determine the order of finish for that kid to make sure they get a ribbon for their particular swim. Okay. If that happens, that swim, unless you can say with any remote certainty what the time was to any accuracy, that swim will be marked as an exhibition swim. And that swimmer, again, they'll get the ribbon. They're just technically not going to be able to score points because you don't have an accurate time for that swimmer to compare against other swimmers. Lane timers. Like I said, the home team provides one timer for each of their meets, for each of their lanes that are in the pool. The big thing here is, like I said, if you can get two people in a lane, it helps. It'll make things work a little bit more efficiently and effectively. But if you're limited on personnel or limited on space on the deck, you can trim that down to one timer per lane. The head or backup timer, again, that person I just talked about, that job, primary job there is their backup. So if a timer's watch doesn't start, they can start a watch when the race starts and provide that as a backup watch, and they can record times for first and second place. Computer operator, like I said, they're going to record all the DQs, put all the stuff in the computer, score the events. Pretty straightforward. Ribbon writers, same pretty much the same job. Okay. Those are the jobs that go into a meet. Any questions so far? Okay. So the next big part is, let's get back to that PowerPoint, please. So I've already talked a little bit about the meet referees in both situations. Just a couple of quick reminders. In-person meets, ASA scheduled official. You get a weekly schedule. Home team confirms with the rep by 6 o'clock the night before. Again, it's a $90 cost split between the two teams. If a meet is rained out, how does the referee get paid? So the ref gets paid pretty simply. If they show up, unless you cancel the meet before they got there and they didn't travel to your pool, they're going to get paid the $90, even if you don't even swim, because it's pretty much they're getting paid for their time and the effort they're going to have to be there. Plus, they're going to be waiting around for you to start the meet anyway. Okay. That cost is split between the two teams. If the meet is rescheduled or a portion of the meet is rescheduled to be made up, then that referee is going to get paid $90 again. And technically, the home team is supposed to pay the ref in that situation. The reason for that is the home team has concessions to generate revenue to pay the referee. If the visiting team wants to extend the courtesy and their budget can afford it, they can offer to help split that cost for a makeup meet. Okay. For virtual meets, like I said, you can self-officiate if you like. If you request an ASA ref, they still get paid the $90 and will be paid by the team that requested the official. And it can be a situation where one team wants to be officiated by an ASA ref, the other team can self-officiate. It doesn't require the other team to do what you're doing. Okay. So let's go back to lineup results and exchange and go to pages 11 and 12 of your rule book. So for each week, you're going to exchange, if it's an in-person meet, you're going to exchange lineups with the other team. And actually, we skip down to page 12 to see this, item 7. So the coaches of both teams are going to exchange meet rosters and lineups by 3 o'clock the day before the meet. So we'll get into a timeline of what goes on during the week in just a few minutes. Okay. So they're going to exchange lineups 3 o'clock the day before the meet. Or they can pick an agreeable time to both teams. They want to move it a little bit later in the day, that's fine. Just as long as both teams exchange things in a timely fashion and one team doesn't send their stuff and has to wait for 3 hours for the other team to send their stuff. Okay, we'll talk about how to avoid that in just a few minutes. Okay. When you're exchanging lineups, you're going to exchange essentially 3 primary items. First, an export of the actual entries themselves created in Meet Manager, in Team Manager, Team Unify, Swimtopia, whatever you're using to do your entries. That will be included with the heats and lanes with a formatted file that can be imported into either Meet Maestro or Meet Manager. Okay. Second, you're going to include a full team roster. That's every swimmer on your team, whether they're in the meet or not. And the reason for having that file is quite simply, you need those names in the event that somebody has to be substituted in the day of the meet for somebody that's unable to be there. And that way your computer people don't have to type that person's name, date of birth, and all that other stuff in there. If the roster's in there, they can quickly access that person's info. It's already in the computer. Finally, you're going to create a PDF of your meet entry spreadsheet. Okay. And again, we'll cover all this good stuff in the high-tech training in greater detail. But those are the 3 primary things you're going to exchange each week with the other team. Then at that point, it's the home team that's going to combine everything and compile the meet into one nice, tight, neat, organized package, minimizing the number of lanes that are used, minimizing the number of heats that are used in the meet. Okay, through a process we call meet consolidation. Again, stuff we're going to cover in the high-tech training. Okay, when you exchange the meet entry spreadsheet, you need to include the heat and lanes for the swimmers so teams can easily review each other's lineups and look for any situations where there might be irregularities or potential rules infractions by entering people in too many events. We talked about that in the prior meeting, but that's covered in the rule book as well on pages 9 through 16. Okay. Once you exchange lineups with the other team, those entries are pretty much locked in place, except for the relay personnel. So you can change who's on the relays to your heart's content, but the individual events are pretty much locked in place, except for what we call legal substitutions. Again, a topic we covered in our previous meeting. Okay. In general, though, the substitutions can take place up to 30 minutes before the meet starts. Okay. And again, that can happen throughout the day. That goes back to our communication thing. That's something that teams should be actively either calling or emailing each other throughout the day. Hey, we just ran practice, found out these 10 kids are sick, hurt, arrested, take your pick. They can't be here today. We're going to pull the kids out of heat 2, out of the exhibition events, move them in. We're going to take this kid that we thought wasn't going to be here. Now they're here and available. We're going to put them in the meet in this event. All that stuff can take place throughout the day and an ongoing conversation and dialogue to speed up the process of getting the meet actually started on time at 5:30. Okay. The cutoff for these substitutions, though, is 30 minutes before the meet starts. At that point, everything needs to be finalized, printed, ready to go. Okay. Let's scroll down. Go to page 27 of the rule book. So page 27 talks about virtual meets. And the lineup results exchange. So for a virtual meet, you're not going to exchange lineups with the other team prior to the meet. That's actually going to take place at the end of the meet after all the times are in. So you're just going to exchange results files with the other team. And that stuff can be merged in Meet Manager or Meet Maestro, take your pick, whichever product you're using. Steps to do it are covered in the training for those classes. But you're not going to do the standard lineup exchange in a virtual meet that you would for an in-person meet. Okay. Skip down to pages 34 through 36, please. The actual process of the meet file and result exchange is covered here in step 3. Again, this is more stuff we're going to cover in the high-tech training than we will here. But bottom line, this is kind of the timeline of events for how this stuff's going to work and play out. And again, really just going to swap a couple of electronic files, a couple of PDFs, just a paper backup, and then a full backup of that database that's got to be accessed. And then that way, all that stuff can be easily merged between the two teams. Okay. The steps for how to merge the actual results are covered in step 5 on pages 34 through 36. Again, stuff we'll cover more explicitly in the high-tech training than we'll cover in this class. But like I said, that's where those steps are laid out. Okay. Let's jump back to page 18 in the rule book. So that covers a little bit more and this is for an in-person meet. The timeline of events for the week is covered on pages 18 through 20. So step 1, lineup swap. Just talked about that. In general, like I said, the big thing here is teams will do their entries independently from each other. And then the day before the meet, they'll exchange stuff electronically with each other. It's a very transparent process. And the real big thing here, I talked about doing this in a timely fashion. The important thing with this is, and again, we cover this in pretty good detail in the high-tech training. Big thing here is teams should be on the phone with one another when they exchange this information because they're going to do it via email most likely. I don't see a lot of teams walk around with flash drives going, oh, here's our stuff. It doesn't work that way. You're going to swap emails with each other, and then the home team's going to take the lead and consolidate the meet. Okay. The big thing here is be on the phone with one another. Say, hey, look, I'll call you at 3:00 and I'm going to send my stuff, you send your stuff, and we'll make sure that we get each other's files. If you say, hey, just send it at 3 and I'll look for it, you're going to set yourself up for a possible scenario like this. You send your stuff at 3:00 and they're supposed to send theirs at 3. And at 3:30, you still have an email from the other team. So you decide, oh, I'm going to look up that team, call them up. Hey, where's your file? No answer. You try to call the coach, no answer. Try to call the other rep, no answer. It's 4:00 now. Still haven't talked to anybody. And you start thinking, I wonder if they're looking at my lineup. And again, I always tell teams expect the best from each other, but this is a situation that is really sets things off on a really bad tone for the week. Okay. If you run into a situation where you have sent stuff and you hadn't heard back from the other team inside of 30 or 40 minutes, it's not an immediate drop everything and call Frankie, but it is a drop me an email, put me in the loop to let me know what's going on. And I'll try and reach out to the teams as well. And in most cases, there's an honest situation for what's going on. Maybe somebody, is sick, had a family emergency, whatever else that they can't control. And it's just not a priority to send you their entry file at that point. But that should be something that you should probably call them and give them a heads up if you can. Communication, again, being a real governing factor here. So again, just be on the phone with one another. If you do that, you can avoid any confusion, any suspicion, and any problems at all. Okay. Step 2, entry consolidation. So once the home team gets both, they got the entry files for both teams, they're going to go through in high tech and pack everything together in a process we call entry consolidation and limit the number of heats. Okay. If they just leave everybody in their heats and lanes, teams did their lineups blind. So the home team put their kids in lanes 2, 4, and 6 for heat after heat after heat. So say, for example, in the 9 and 10 girls, you have a ton of 9 and 10 girls on your team. They have very few. You could have 5 or 6 heats of just 3 kids in the water unless you consolidate all that stuff down and pack kids into the minimum number of lanes that you can use. Okay, this shaves a ton of time off the meet and it's something that's got to be done. So this should be done by 10 o'clock the night before the meet. And here's why. You're going to move around a lot of heats and lanes on some swimmers. And when you do that, the other team is completely in the dark as to where their swimmers are going now. Okay, especially in the exhibition heats. So it's really important for them to be able to have that information updated and complete. So this needs to be done by the home team by 10 o'clock the night before the meet or some agreed upon time. But don't wait till the day of the meet to try and do this, because each team should be able to walk into practice the day of a meet and be able to go, okay, hey, here is all of our updated entries. Here is an entry list with all of our stuff. Here's a report that we can email out to the teams. Here's a heat sheet with everything everybody's swimming. Okay, that can be sent out to each team, and each team comes in on an equal footing. The coaches and parents, the day of the meet, can start writing on the kids' arms with Sharpie, or you could send that out to the parents and say, you know what, you guys mark up the kids with Sharpie. I'm tired of having my fingers look like they're bruised and battered from writing on arms by for 50 kids. Okay, but that can't happen if the meet's not consolidated the night before and a backup of that meet database is sent to the visiting team. Okay, if you don't get that backup by the night before, give me a heads up. I'll try and help things out. If a team is struggling with doing this consolidation process, your first course of action should be reach out to your opponents. Hey guys, our computer guys tied up on a business trip. They can't get back in town. Could you guys put the meet together? It's just easy for them to do it. But if they can't do it, call me. Send the files to me. I'll put the meet together if I have to. I don't really want to do that, but hopefully, if it helps you guys, I'll be happy to do it. Report completion. What do you need to print out before a meet?
Hey,
yes.
Does the consolidated list show up in high tech, or do we need to communicate that via email?
It's going to be communicated via email with a backup of the high tech database. So the computer person that's putting this stuff together, when they're done, there's a way for them to create a file that they can send to the other team, to their computer person, that they can load on their end. So that's how that process works. Again, something we cover in good detail in the high tech training. Okay. So again, what do you need to print out before a meet? So in general, you need to print out some just common sense stuff. First, The home team is going to print most of the paperwork for the meet. So this is going to include things like the lane timer sheets, the UK judges placing forms. Okay, I showed you samples of those just a few minutes ago. They're going to print out a heat sheet for just general use for the teams and print out a reasonable number for each team to have access to. But the home team has this info. So does the visiting team. They can print this stuff out on their own for any specific reports they need. And the big one here is heat sheets. Come to the meet with your own heat sheets. Don't show up as a visiting team and tell the home team, hey, can y'all print us 50 heat sheets? I get emails or phone calls about that almost every year about one or two teams. Don't be that team, okay? Come equipped, be ready to do that. But in general, the home team does need to print the operational stuff for the meet, and certainly they're going to print all the last minute revisions that include the substitutions, all the last minute changes that had to go on. They're going to print an updated heat sheet for the primary people that need it, like the meet ref, the announcer, the head coaches of each team, the deck managers, the place judges, you know, the key people in the meet that really have to have the latest and greatest. Okay. The pre-meet meeting and substitutions, like I said, the substitutions can take place throughout the day. But the big thing here is when the visiting team gets there, again, the home rep ought to reach out to the visiting team rep, introduce each other. If there are any issues that have to come up during the meet, they know who each other are, okay, and they can be resolved quickly and easily, okay. Introduce yourselves to the officials, to the meet ref, okay. That's another big one. Head rep, head coach should each say, hey, I'm so and so. I'm with Hannibal West. I'm the head coach, or I'm the team rep, or whatever. Okay. Meet operation. Again, it's just once you get going, it's a pretty straightforward process. So about 10 minutes before the meet starts, you're going to get the first couple of races are going to be called to go to the blocks and get lined up. So at 5:30, when that meet's supposed to start, or 6 o'clock if your meet starts at 6, you can hit the ground running on time. Okay. The biggest way to get your meet done quickly, start on time. Okay. So 10 minutes out, announcers should call groups to the blocks, get kids organized so you get started on time. The kids get to the blocks, deck manager does that last minute check. In fact, let's scroll back into the PowerPoint. I've got a diagram of all this stuff that covers this pretty effectively. So for an in-person meet, slide down one more slide, please, Matt. So if you look at this diagram, I've got swimmers lined up, I got timers lined up, I got all these neat people here. So if you notice, DM1, DM2, for the swimmers on the far side of the pool, if it's a 25-yard race, they're going to do that last check. The kids will get lined up. If you see those little stopwatch icons, those are the timers in each lane. One person with a stopwatch, one person with a clipboard. Okay. Deck manager does the last check, a heat or two before the event goes. Starter referee steps them up, gives them their instructions, starts the race. At that point, the swimmers are going to swim down the pool. The timers will have started their stopwatches. When they get to the finish end, they'll stop their watch. The person with the watch tells the person what the time is with the clipboard. They write down that time onto their clipboard. If you notice 2 place judges right next to each other, the people in red, they literally write down on their heat sheet their order of finish, compare notes, and if they agree, they give it to the person with the little clipboard icon. That's the judge's recorder sitting right behind them. Okay. If the place judges disagree, they can ask the starter referee, can you break the tie? If the starter referee didn't see it, they say, hey, that places a tie. The computer table can, when they input the times, it goes in as a tie. The points get split. If you notice the flow of traffic with those blue arrows, so the person with that clipboard icon, the judge's recorder, they record the order of finish, and then they hand that off to MR1 and MR2. Those are your master recorders. They'll give it to either one or two. They can't give it to both of them. It's just one piece of paper. They'll go in a loop down the lanes and then circle back and go to the computer table. That's just the general flow of the paperwork around the deck. It's pretty straightforward, and it's literally rinse and repeat. Do it 86 times and you've got a whole swim meet in there. Okay. That's for an in-person meet. If you slide down one more slide, Matt. Actually, go back up. Yes, yes, right. In-person meet workers. Go to the next slide. So like I said, the step-by-step process, deck manager checks the kids, right lanes, right places. Place judge records the order of finish independently on their meet program. Compare notes. If they agree, communicate to the judge's recorder. Judge's recorder records the official order of finish onto their copy of the judge's placing form. Judge's recorder hands the UK judge's form over the master recorder. They just go from lane to lane, record the times, and they just alternate races. Okay, they're in one big relay loop, essentially. Two people working in the lanes as timers, one with a clipboard, one with a stopwatch. They record, person with the watch starts the watch at the start, stops the watch at the finish. Person with the clipboard records that time and communicates with the master recorder. Once they've recorded all the times on that master's recorder, from the master recorder on the judge's placing form, the UK judge's placing form, they just loop that thing right back over the computer table and go back, get in line, do it again. Okay. So let's go back into the rule book real quick. And let's scroll down to page, I think, 34. Sorry, 33, my mistake. Scroll up just a little bit, Matt. So I've highlighted again in yellow the differences. This is for a virtual meet. The big difference here is step one, each team's going to complete their lineup on their own side using their team management software, create their entries, and they're just going to dump that stuff in a meet manager directly on their computer. Okay, they'll do that separately. They're not going to exchange lineups at that point. Okay. They can complete their meet that week on any schedule they want, just as long as they're, going to get things completed by the deadline they've set with the other team. If you hit bad weather or something like that, just give the other team a heads up. Say, hey, your pool's closed the other day. We had a plumbing problem and things backed up. We couldn't do anything, and we didn't have any control over what happened. So pool's closed that day. We're going to need an extra day to get things complete. You can be flexible with each other and make that work. Skip down to step 3. The big thing here is with meet operation, again, we cover this in high-tech training, the teams won't score the events during the meet in high-tech. Here's why. There's nobody to score against. You're going to score all the points, so it doesn't work. It makes it very difficult to exchange results with the other team. So again, to avoid that problem, don't score the events. Okay. Each event will start and be swum to completion. And the team timers, again, they're just going to record those times. The processes of the meet that I just described for an in-person meet versus a virtual meet are relatively similar. And the paperwork flow is still relatively similar. The biggest difference here, let's go back in that PowerPoint real quick. If we look at the deck for a virtual meet layout, notice a couple of big differences. Number one, the judge's recorder, or I'm sorry, the place judge, there's one of them. There's not two. There's no judge's recorder there. Okay. That big kind of alarm clock looking thing, that's your backup timer. Okay. Notice also the clipboard, the master recorder, that person should actually be staged at the opposite end from the computer table. It prevents them from having to take a longer walk. So if if lane 6 is on the opposite side of the pool and the computer table is located by lane 1, the master recorder ought to start at lane 6 and just go record those times in one straight shot. Okay. It'll save a little bit of legwork and gets things to them a little bit quicker, actually. Okay. Notice again, you can get away with one timer per lane. We still advise 2 if you can get away with it. Scroll over to that next slide, Matt. So like I said, teams can use coaches or parents to check that the right swimmer's in the right lane. So you really don't need that deck manager. One place judges are going to record the order of finish on their copy of the meet program. That's only going to be needed if the timer and the head timer, backup timer, fail to get a time for a lane. So again, the master recorder will go from lane to lane, getting the times for each timer. Like I said, if possible, having 2 master recorders helps speed this process up. Okay. One other alternative for collecting the times, if you're really pinched on volunteers, you could wait until a lane timer sheet gets completely filled, and then you just take that one piece of paper over to your high-tech person, and they can input all the times on that page. I'm not a huge fan of doing that because there's a possibility to get off by a heat or a race. I still like doing things kind of the old-fashioned way with one race, having one piece of paper to record all the data. Again, 1 timer per lane. They can operate the watch and the clipboard. But like I said, if you can afford 2 people, it'll help things work more efficiently and effectively. The head backup timer, the big difference here, they're there as a redundancy in case a lane timer's watch doesn't start or they don't get a finish. And the big thing here is communicate with your timers. Say, hey, if that happens, be very loud, wave your arms, throw things if you need to get somebody's attention. Primarily the backup timer, so they know to go quickly to that lane, provide a replacement watch, or get a finish time for that swimmer. Okay. If no time is recorded, the master recorder should be notified to mark that swimmer as exhibition. So put on there no time, EX, whatever you need to do to mark that info correctly. Again, something we will cover in the high-tech training. Once the master recorder is recorded all the times, and they hand that completed form to the computer operator, they can then input the times and do their thing that the computer operators normally do for a meet. Okay. Let's go back to the rule book real quick. The big difference here for meets will be in step 3, the meet and file exchange. Like I said, you're not exchanging lineups before the meet. You're only exchanging results when the meet's over. Okay. And the steps for merging that stuff are pretty straightforward in step 5 on pages 34 through 36. And again, that's more high-tech stuff than it is stuff for you guys as team coordinators. But that's the big difference in a virtual meet and an in-person meet. And like I've shown you, it might involve fewer workers and a little bit less crowded deck. So again, there are some advantages to that. Jump back to our PowerPoint at this point. So that's pretty much the processes of running a meet and the steps that go into doing it. Slide over that next slide, please. Do you guys have any questions for me at this point?
You're clean. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute.
Okay. But otherwise, what's next? Keep signing your kids up, keep communicating, let them know that team's open for business. Because a lot of teams, once word's gotten out, teams are getting, back up to, comparable capacity to what we had in 2019. Like I said, over communicate with your teams. There's a lot of new stuff that's going to come on board. So like I said, I keep hammering home how important communication is. It really lends itself to letting things go a lot more smoothly. Be transparent with people about stuff. I mean, that takes a lot of the, there's a little bit of, fear is a bad word, but there's some people that are still a little bit, nervous about how this is all going to play out. But if you lay things out in a really clear way that they can understand, it gives them a comfort level that's going to, encourage them to have their kids take part in this. And when that happens and you make it work, which you guys will, they're going to, spread, the word's going to spread quickly. And if your registration's still open, you're going to see kids continue to join your teams as this goes on. I think you guys are going to do an awesome job with this. The other meetings are coming up. We got high-tech training this Saturday at 10 a.m. via Zoom. I'm sending out notes on that tomorrow that you guys can share with everybody. That will be recorded. So if you're interested in that, same thing. It's a long class. I know it's a lot to take. And tonight, again, sorry, I was a little bit wordy, but like I said, hopefully this was good, helpful material. Meet Maestro, we're going to do training for that that new platform next Saturday, May 15th. I think it's actually going to be at 3 o'clock instead of 2:30. I'll send out a reminder on that with the link to the Zoom meeting for that. But again, it's an exciting new product that we're excited about the teams being able to have that as another tool in their arsenal to help operate their meets and hopefully we'll run it efficiently. Teams can pick up their ribbons next Wednesday at Marist at the pool between 4 and 7:30 p.m. If for some reason you're unable to pick up your ribbons, which hopefully that won't be the case this year, if you're not able to make yourself, if you can't get to Marist on Wednesday the 12th, ask another team to pick them up for you. Ask another coordinator to do it. Ask another coach to do it. If you've got a student at Marist, they can make arrangements with the coach over there to swing by and grab the ribbons because they're on campus. Okay, but try and make arrangements to get those ribbons next week. Otherwise, like I said, we're trying to do in-person training for the coaches meeting, but we still haven't got confirmation on that yet. Otherwise, I'd say, well, your coaches can pick them up at the coaches meeting, but if we do it virtually, that's not necessarily going to be an option. So you need to get those ribbons, and that's going to be the one known slot we can do this because, like I said, just like everywhere else, a lot of these schools are pretty much locked down still to some extent. They don't like a lot of outsiders coming onto campus unless they really have to be there. Coaches meetings, again, we do rules clinics for them on the 16th and 23rd at 3 o'clock. Hopefully we're going to be at Marist, but if we're not, we're going to do it virtually. Again, if your coaches didn't participate in the rules meeting last week, they need to attend one of those sessions as part of their requirements to be coaches in the league. Again, I know I covered a lot of stuff, and some of it may feel like drinking from a fire hose. But if again, you sit down after this and go, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? I've got 1,000 questions. Call me. I'll answer every last one of them that I can. Okay. And the ones that I can't, I'll find an answer and I'll get it to you as quickly as I can. But like I said, I can't answer the questions that don't get asked. I can't help the people that don't ask for the help. And to me, yes.
Question for you. What is the interest so far in Meet Maestro versus high tech? Team is erring towards Meet Maestro. Just from logistical point of view, they've been using a very old laptop that's kind of on its last legs, whereas the Meet Maestro is cloud-based, so it can be used on any laptop. We don't want to be one of the minorities doing that and make it complicated.
I think that right now the majority of teams are going to probably try and stick with Meet Manager this year, just because there's so many other new challenges that they have on their plates. But I'd say that we've probably got at least, 15, 20 teams, maybe more than that are going to give Meet Maestro a whirl. They may not do it for every meet. They may wait till a little bit later in the season to try it, but the interest is there. And again, I would not open the door to this unless I had confidence in the fact that it can be done. And especially if you're a team in that situation where you've got an older computer, you don't have the original installation CDs and the other big challenges, high tech's, tech support lately has been almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. The way I've been told that you can get in touch with anybody with them right now is via email, that they're answering phone calls or anything like that, which I find very curious. But like I said, I don't own that company. If I did, I'd tell them to do things differently, but I can't. So I think that, if you're in a situation where you're trying to decide, do we replace the computer? Do we buy the upgraded version of high tech and, plop down several $100 to do it? This may be the year to slide to Meet Maestro.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want to be, a team in the minority of using Meet Maestro. It just adds that extra element if you're trying to convert files from high tech and all those kind of things.
The nice thing is the steps for moving files out of one platform into the other are real simple. Yeah. Both directions.
Okay.
They're like 2 or 3 files. Again, we'll cover in exhaustive detail in the high tech training and put the resources online for teams to understand it. But it's pretty straightforward where you're literally, if you're the high tech team and you're the home team that week and you come up with your, the consolidated meet, there is a file you can export out of Meet Manager and create a file for use in Meet Maestro that can be imported directly in.
Yeah, it seemed, I had a meeting with Ellie Overton and it seemed fairly straightforward and usable. So, okay, thank you.
Same thing if you're on the other side of it and you're the high tech team and the Meet Maestro team is the one putting things together, they can send you a file that you can upload on your end with all the consolidated Meet, with all the new heats and lanes, and you can print whatever paperwork you want out of Meet Manager on your end without any issues or challenges. So,
We'll give it a go then.
awesome. Any other questions?
Looking good.
Well, folks, it is still Cinco de Mayo. I think everybody's earned a margarita tonight, or at least maybe at least a cerveza. So again, if y'all think of anything else you need, please don't hesitate to let me know. I really want to help y'all out any way that I can. So I thank y'all for your good work, and we look forward to a great swim season. And I'm excited. So we'll leave it open for maybe another minute in case anybody has any questions, and then otherwise we'll send y'all on your merry way.